Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human existence.
It's great to be here. Hope your week is off to a good start.
It is, thank you, and I'm really looking forward to this because we're tackling something that I think every single organization is feeling right now. Just the sheer speed of change.
Mhm.
The ground feels like it's constantly moving under our feet, and the stress inside these companies is, well, it's immense.
It absolutely is. And it's important to see that this stress is structural. It's not just a bad quarter or a market cycle.
Right.
So today, our goal is really to get under the hood of that, to uh, analyze the very specific accelerating changes happening and, maybe more importantly, what it means for the kind of people who need to be guiding our organizations.
To really get a grip on the instability now, I think we have to quickly glance back. We always talk about industrial revolutions, but they weren't just about technology, were they? They were shifts in, well, everything.
Exactly. The first industrial revolution, that was all about scarcity.
Wow.
Suddenly we could make enough, a fundamental shift from necessity to plenty.
And the second one?
That was driven by American capitalism, really.
Mm.
Electricity, synthetics. So it became about scale, about creating wealth.
Which led us to the third, in the 1900s. That's when we saw the real shift to the service sector. Automation, computers, those early cell phones.
And the idea of the customer really came into focus.
Right. So that brings us to now, the fourth. And this is where the instability really comes from, because it's not one thing. It's three massive forces all hitting at once.
That's the key. They're interlocking.
The first one is globalization, and it's not the old version of it. It's total. It just shatters local value chains. You could be sourcing raw materials from one continent and find your main competitor is a company you've never even heard of from another.
And that is being amplified relentlessly by the second force, digitalization. New platforms, AI, robotics.
Mhm.
It allows anyone to reach your customer directly.
Instantly.
It disrupts every single industry and just shortens the life of every product.
And the third piece of this puzzle is democratization. This one is fueled by transparency. Everyone has a smartphone. They can see exactly how people on the other side of the world live and work.
Which naturally leads to questions about equality, about standards, and it changes what customers expect. They want natural products, they want ethical sourcing, they demand to know.
So you take those three forces, you combine them, and what you get is a crisis. It's an existential crisis of stability.
We're not talking about just, a few market corrections. We're talking about extinction-level events for companies.
And you have the data on this, which is just staggering. What's the one statistic that really tells the story here?
I think it's this. Between the year 2000 and 2020, just a 20-year span, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies were wiped out.
52%.
Gone. Vanished.
Mm-hmm.
Their business models just became obsolete.
More than half of the biggest companies in the world disappeared in 2 decades. That says everything you need to know about the speed we're dealing with.
It does. And the fallout is that the average corporate lifespan plummeted. It went from around 75 years down to just 5.
5 years.
5 years. If you're leading a company today and that 5-year window doesn't terrify you, you're just not seeing the reality of the situation.
And of course, this complete reorganization of the market reshapes the workforce. We're seeing job demand increase in 2 very different areas. First, frontline jobs, right?
Mm-hmm. Essential jobs.
Nursing, construction, even specialized farming, because people want cleaner product.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, the explosion in tech jobs.
Yeah.
Cloud computing, big data, AI, fintech. It's just enormous.
But the flip side is the jobs that are disappearing, all those tactic-based secretarial roles.
The automatable work.
Exactly. Cashiers, data entry, things a computer can do better, faster, and cheaper. It's changing the whole idea of what an entry-level job is.
And this brings us right to a huge mistake that so many companies are making. In the middle of all this chaos, they confuse managing a job with what we should be calling human direction.
They sound similar, but they're not.
They are fundamentally different things, but organizations conflate them constantly.
Okay, so let's draw a really clear line. What is job management?
Job management is about the task, its process. It's about planned steps, control, coordination, communication. You manage time, you manage a budget, you manage resources.
It's the what.
It's the what. But human direction, that's about the who. It's about collaboration, building real partnerships, creating a community within a team.
Yeah.
And it absolutely depends on the leader's own self-regulation and their ability to communicate.
So what's the core truth here?
The core truth is that people aren't manageable. not like inventory or a budget.
That's a powerful statement. If people aren't manageable, how does anything get done?
Through alignment, through intrinsic motivation. You see, when you try to manage a person, you get friction, you get resistance. But when you guide a person, you tap into their own desire to contribute, to be part of something.
And yet we see the same mistake everywhere. The best technical person gets promoted to lead the team,
It's a classic management trap. She's our best coder, so let's make her the manager.
when really the right path requires a totally different plan, right? A kind of succession plan for leadership itself.
A directional plan? Yes. It's a sequence. You have a talented worker who becomes a real contributor, who then becomes a competent professional, and then a value creator who connects teams and ideas. It's only after all that that they should even be considered for a directional role.
And there's a key question that gets missed in that entire process.
Always. You have to ask them, are you actually eager to guide other people? Is that the work you want to do now? Because it's different work. If they're not, you're setting them and the whole team up to fail.
This really sets up the central idea here, doesn't it? That all effective guidance, all leadership, starts with an internal transformation. You can't take others where you haven't gone yourself.
That is the foundation. I mean, the definition of guides, whether you're a CEO or a parent, it's the same. It's the effort to see the potential in your environment, living, non-living, whatever, and then strive to realize it.
And the rule that makes that possible is leadership begins with the self.
It has to. You simply cannot give direction if you're in a state of emotional dysregulation. If you're anxious, if you're aggressive, if your voice is raised, you just broadcast your own internal instability.
You can't inspire anyone if you're coming from a place of fear.
Impossible.
Yeah.
You can't understand what motivates them because you're trapped in your own noise.
So does that mean some people just aren't built for it? Or can this stuff, compassion, effective direction, can it be learned?
Oh, it can absolutely be learned, but it takes real dedication. And you have to understand how we learn these things. Only about 10% comes from reading a book or taking a course.
Okay.
20% comes from watching others, from peer learning. But the other 70%, that's from doing it, from trial and error, from mentorship, and from a huge amount of self-observation.
And the cost of not doing that work is very real now. It's not just a theory. We see it in the turnover rates.
Exactly. The current workforce, especially younger people, they're selective. They can and will enforce their boundaries. They'll just walk away.
They leave before that 5-year mark we talked about.
All the time. Because they won't put up with a toxic environment created by an inauthentic, poorly regulated leader. And that costs companies a fortune in recruitment and training. It's a massive financial drain.
Your research on this actually led to a framework, the Human-Centric Guidance Model, or HCG, which is built around 8 of these core human characteristics.
Yes, and the key thing about these traits, things like effort, courage, foresight, insight, wisdom, isn't just having them, it's the climatic effect they have on the entire organization. It's about being, relating, and doing all at the same time.
Give us an example. How does a trait like, say, wisdom create a climate?
Well, think about innovation. Every company says they want it. But innovation doesn't come from buying new servers. It comes from people having a sense of wonder, of curiosity, that allows them to imagine new strategies. Wisdom is the ability to apply that wonder in a way that creates real, long-term value.
Yeah.
So the climate has to be one that encourages curiosity, not just efficiency.
The research also pointed to 3 specific traits that really set the top-performing companies apart in these chaotic times: foresight, insight, and courage.
And let's spend a second on courage, because it's the absolute foundation for psychological safety.
Which is a term we hear a lot, but I think it's often misunderstood.
It's completely misunderstood. People think psychological safety just means being nice. It's not. It's the result of shared courage.
So,
Think about it. If an employee doesn't have the courage to ask a challenging question, or a manager doesn't have the courage to give honest developmental feedback,
then the relationship isn't really honest.
it's not honest and it's not trustworthy. The whole feedback loop is broken.
And that manager often tells themselves they're being compassionate by not giving the tough feedback. I don't want to hurt their feelings.
Right, which is actually a form of organizational dishonesty.
Yeah.
You're not helping them grow, you're just setting them up to fail again later.
Right.
You create a culture where people say they value growth, but they actually operate on fear and silence. Courage is the only thing that breaks that cycle.
It all comes back to that central finding from all the research. You cannot take others where you have not gone yourself. Leadership is fundamentally an inside job first. You have to navigate your own internal world before you can possibly navigate the external chaos.
It is. And that work is never done. The next step, really, is tackling the deep-seated mentalities that hold us back. The biggest one being the scarcity mindset.
The idea that for me to win, someone else has to lose.
Yeah, exactly. It makes true partnership impossible.
That's a huge topic and one we should definitely come back to. But to close today, I want to come back to this idea of self-leadership. You say the ultimate goal is what you call the effortless life.
Yes. Life shouldn't feel like a constant battle, a constant struggle. We burn so much energy fighting our own internal narratives, filtering everything we see to confirm what we already believe or fear.
So the clarity you get from this kind of internal work is what allows you to move toward that state.
Precisely. It allows for conscious, open-minded choice instead of just habitual reaction. When your inner purpose, your intention, is clear and authentic, then your actions in the world become aligned and effective. And that's when it starts to feel effortless.
So the final question for you, the listener, is really this. Are your actions right now being driven by that authentic inner purpose? Or are they just a reaction to the pressures of a world that is already disappearing? Something to consider as you move forward.
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for this.
Always a pleasure. We will definitely be back to unpack that scarcity mindset.